In this episode, we introduce you to a flexible strategy to get your projects done on time without having to sacrifice quality. Hello and welcome back to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. This is the live stream for episode 474. I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Thank you so much for joining us today. And for those of you who are viewing this episode recorded and not live, and in case you're not viewing, please remember this is a video episode. So if you're only getting audio, please look for the play video episode link in your podcast app or simply go to pm-podcast.com/474 and you can play the video from the website. Today's interview. Our workplace has evolved, yet the strategies to empower employees and teams are still maturing. So we want to fill this gap today by providing a practical framework to inspire teams and keep them accountable for ultimate success. But rather than impose a single method to make you a better project manager, we're going to be looking at a flexible strategy that'll help you lead confidently, take advantage of all the perspectives on your team, and get the job and your project done on time without having to sacrifice quality. And joining us today from Southern California is Kevin Torf. Hello, Kevin. Welcome to the Project Management Podcast.
Oh, good morning. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the podcast and looking forward to interacting with your audience and appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
All right, of course. Before I introduce you to our audience, a quick recap or pre-cap maybe. What would you say our audience can expect from our conversation today?
I'm hoping that they can get some ideas and thoughts that the book has laid out in ways of being effective and different methods to achieve certain objectives. Hopefully the book will give them some insight to that, where we can go over some of those tips over the podcast today, and hopefully they can take those forward and put them into practice.
Excellent. So thank you for that. And now, here's everything you need to know about Kevin for today. He is an information systems executive with a career spanning more than 30 years, specializing in large IT strategic plans, project designs, procurement, and implementation. And over his career, he has orchestrated the design and implementation of numerous complex IT infrastructure deployments across the globe, including some of the world's largest communication network systems. He brings years of experience in executive level technology and consulting services. He has traveled to more than 30 countries to conduct business, and he's a strong advocate of professional development and has completed multiple training programs in the US, UK, Germany, Australia, and Canada. And he mentioned it, he also wrote a book. And here it is, Getting the Job Done. And here's what we see on Amazon about the book, what is written about it. Conveyed through 100 educational, factual, and relatable project management tips, the framework described in the book will keep your team engaged, responsible, and transparent. Through our Getting the Job Done philosophy, the key how we've led healthcare tech consulting for over 15 years, you will master the building blocks for effective project management as outlined by our acronym P.R.O.J.E.C.T.S, which stands for projects, and it's planning, reflection, organization, juggling, empowerment, communication, teamwork, standards. Don't worry, we'll go through each of these 8 letters in just a moment. Kevin, to get us started, why did you write the book? Why this particular book?
I never started out with the intention of writing a book, but over the years, I've been trying to refine my ideas and thoughts. We practice a lot of these ideas that are in the book today and have been doing that for the last 10 years. And I wanted to start trying to build out a record of some of the thoughts that I had. And I have refined them over the years. And once we had a compilation of them, I thought, wow, what a great idea to make this into a book. And I started putting the effort together to bringing it about and structure in it, and had some good help with some of my colleagues in the company. And we now have a book
Right.
through a lot
So
of effort.
these anecdotes and tips are a collection of your own, of your customers, of your colleagues. Do I understand that right?
So not the antidotes. The antidotes were a way to find a way to compare a tip to some time in history that would make it a little bit more fun and more palatable. I generally don't like reading very complex academic books myself. So when I did decide to start
Hmm.
writing this book, I wanted to find a way to do it in a manner that someone could find very light-hearted, find something in history they could compare the tip to. And yes, I did some research and we looked for different ideas. And those were the tips that came through and were antidoted into each one of them.
Right. And then the acronym P.R.O.J.E.C.T.S stands for projects, obviously. How did that get developed?
As we started sorting and organizing all the tips, I tried to put them into different categories, and I started realizing that, the word project actually goes well with the acronyms of planning and juggling and reflection. These are key words,
Yeah.
which I didn't realize before I started again. One of those things which you learn as you evolve. And I thought, wow, this could be a great way to maybe structure the book. And I then started organizing it accordingly, and it took on its own life. And you have the acronym that you have today.
All right. The acronym is 8 letters long, and what we want to do is we want to go through these 8 letters. And please, if you do have any comments for us, then here is Kasim Abbas, who has joined us today, who says hello. And so if you yourself are on live and you have a question for us, then please do use the chat here and put your questions in the chat so I can bring that up. Well, let us get started then with the first of the 8 letters, which is planning. P as in planning. Kevin, what are your thoughts here on this? It's obvious why it is first, because without proper planning, your project will fail. Where do you take it for us?
Looking at the 10 or so tips that I have, the two that probably are the most important to me in planning is the amount that you need to plan. Trying to find that balance between not planning too little and also not planning too much. Each project requires a different amount of effort. You need to understand what your goals and your business objectives are, and get to that perfect level of doing enough so you can understand what your long-term objectives are, but also not doing that much where by the time you get to perform it, it's actually already changed or your business needs have changed, and you're now dealing with a lot of change orders. So my first comment and first advice or tip to the audience is find that balance. And the longer the project, the less detailed you really need to plan. But plan enough to understand the parameters that the project needs to fall within, and then go plan. That effort to get started, that initial iteration, which does require detailed planning, but that will give you the correct balance in order to move forward.
And let me guess, there is no silver bullet, right? There is no recommendation where you can say, oh, this is the correct amount that you need to plan. Everybody needs to figure out on their own, on my project, this is enough, whereas on another project, Well, now I'm outside the picture. This much is enough.
No, that is correct. Some environments change much more often, and an environment that changes very often would probably lead to less planning because it's going to change. So, why plan something that you knowing full well is not going to be what you had thought it would be 3 months before? Some environments are a lot more stable and they don't have as much change. So, with that said, you can plan a little bit more, but I'm mostly err on the side of actually less planning,
Mhm.
because I want to get started and I want to learn from the implications of getting started, and then reflect and make those adjustments as needed in order to be successful. So you are correct. There is no silver bullet, but if you're going to err on one side or another, get started. You don't have to overplan.
Mhm. However, you said don't overplan, get started, yet the second letter in your acronym is, you've already mentioned it, reflection. So, do I reflect before I get started? Do I reflect after, during? How does reflection, the second letter, fit into this?
Well, reflection's a key component of the planning and all aspects of the project, and should be done as frequently as possible, in order to make sure you are on the right track, in order to look at what you set out to achieve, and that's still your objective. Looking at how well you performing as an individual. Could you do something better? Could your team do something better? Looking at what's working, what's not working. So reflection is a very, very important element of any project. And in order to not get caught out with planning too little, you need to reflect, because otherwise you're not going to be able to make the adjustments accordingly. So you can't actually do one without the other. They go hand in hand. And that is how your projects need to evolve, is through this reflection.
Mhm. Uh, Reflection and agile retrospectives, are they related? Are they something completely different?
Well, Agile it calls for you to do reflect on a level of cadence. If you take the iteration of your effort and you break it up into, let's say, every 2 weeks or every month, Agile will recommend and have your team in a more formal capacity sit down after every iteration and say what worked, what didn't work, what could we do differently. Work with the stakeholders to see that your business objectives haven't changed and you're still going in the right direction. So Agile does bring it into more of a formality. Yes, you're correct. But reflection in all forms of project management is something you need to do regardless of the methodology you're utilizing. But Agile definitely brings it into a place in a level of formality that I think is very
Mhm.
healthy.
Right. And before we move on to the next letter, which is going to be organization, uh, let me make sure I understand this correctly. While these letters are in the order so that it spells projects, I don't assume that's the order that they are necessarily intended. Yes, you start with planning at the beginning, but for example, there is one letter, juggling. Juggling happens throughout the project. This is not something that you do only at that moment, right? So these letters are more of in an acronym form for better remembering them. And then you have to figure out yourself, when do I reflect? When do I communicate? When do I bring standards? Oh, I have to start planning again. So this is a big jumble in the end, as any project will be.
That is correct. Uh, Organization is a good one to, that needs
Right.
probably
Let's
to be
yeah.
started at the
Let's
beginning.
take it right there then. So we're going from reflection to organization. There we are.
When you get started on a project, you need to understand the parameters and the constraints that you're going to be faced with. You want to make sure that you have the appropriate resources, that everybody knows what's the expectation is of them, uh, what type of cadence or frequency you're going to be meeting, and setting up the level of governance that you're going to utilize throughout your whole project. So you did say, there's the third letter of the acronym, but one would normally start with saying, all right, let's come together, let's get organized, let's have an understanding of what it's going to take for all of us to work together, and what does finished mean, how do we get over that finish line. And then you start that planning session, just do enough to get started, and then you start reflecting and you start saying, what's working, what's not. That might require you to change some of your organization. You might need to adapt a little bit differently, and then this will allow you to start evolving.
Okay. Yeah. And how often do you go back and look at the organization of your project?
I think it's something that that you should look at every time you go into a reflection. If you're doing this every 2 weeks, but I don't think that's the one area that you should see that much change. So it's just a matter of validating that it doesn't need much change, and moving on. More importantly, it's how you're doing and how you're conducting yourself that you're going to be reflecting on, or the business changes or needs. That's going to be something that's going to happen more often. Hopefully, your organization is not changing that much, as that could be very disruptive, and that could impact, how well you're going to perform as a team.
Okay, thank you. So we've had 3 letters so far: planning, reflection, organization. And now, from my perspective, comes my favorite letter in your acronym. And that acronym is J, as in juggling. And the reason why I say that this is my favorite letter, because I'm personally a juggler. So, yeah, I have juggling balls and pins and rings and everywhere. I actually don't have any around me right now, which is unusual. So, how does juggling fit into project management, Kevin?
Well, we all think if we can juggle and we do it well, it's going to be very productive. To the contrary, juggling is actually one of the biggest challenges many project managers face when they get overworked, when they take on too many priorities, when they take on too many projects. You can't be productive by juggling things. Now, if you got some downtime and you need to find something to fill it, yes, that's obviously going to help, because you want to be productive all the time. But if you got to decide consistently between 2 or 3 projects and do a third of each one of them, and then move on and do a third of the other, well, theoretically, it's going to take you 3 times as long to get any one project completed, because you're only spending a third of your capacity. Where if you just focused on one project, you could knock it out in a third of the time, then get to your second project, knock that out. And because you're doing one project at a time, you must probably even going to be more efficient, and you might even save time. You might even be about 20 to 25% more productive. So this idea that, oh, I can multitask, I can do 2 things at once, I can drink and talk. No, you can't. It doesn't work well. Generally will not give you the results that you want. And unless you have to juggle, and sometimes you do have to, you want to try and avoid it as much as possible.
Mhm. Yeah, what I hear you say is generally that juggling is not a good thing, right?
That is correct, unfortunately.
On a bigger scale. I
Unless you worked
hear
at the circus watching some
Yeah, yeah,
clowns.
yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a whole different story.
That's a whole different story. I hear echoes of the theory of constraints in here. Task switching is bad. Focus on a task and do that. I also hear a little bit of agile in there. Your project team is focused on a single project. You're assigned to that project. You're not managing multiple projects at the same time. You're working on one thing. So all of that kind of, I hear, packaged into that, right?
That is correct. Even the PMP, the frameworks of, having to do multiple things and move from one effort to another, regardless of the methodology that you focused with, even just business, running and managing a company or managing employees. The more focused you can be, the more selective you can be of doing one thing at a time, the more productive you can be. Now,
Mhm.
that doesn't necessarily mean to say that that's always going to happen, or the opportunities of that there's not going to be other factors that influence you having to do multiple things. But it's something you want to be mindful of and avoid wherever you can.
Mhm. We have a comment coming in about juggling from Yolanda here, who says, juggling wears a person out. It does indeed. After about an hour of juggling with my balls, I'm tired, but I don't think that's what Yolanda meant. I do get it, because my life as a project manager, sometimes, you're planning on working on project A in the morning, and then things just change throughout the day, and you constantly have to task switch. At the end of the day, you haven't accomplished anything and you're completely worn out.
No, it definitely will wear you out, and in multiple different ways, not just making you tired because you're trying to do too many things, but mentally. And also, to me, being worn out, if I'm being successful, I believe I can do more because I get motivated by what I'm doing. But
Hmm.
juggling doesn't always lend itself to be productive, which that means it could impact some of your success, and that can be very, very tiring in itself, just mentally, for not getting the results you want. So yes, many you can refer to being worn out or being burnt out in many different ways, but that is correct. That is one of the implications of juggling.
Hmm. We're moving on from juggling to the next letter. Oh, and by the way, we have reached the halfway point. So this is letter number 5 that we're now looking at here. We're going from juggling to empowerment. Kevin, tell us how empowerment fits into your approach.
Well, this is one of my favorite acronyms. It's one of my favorite words, and I believe could be the most valuable tool as you evolve and build your team in order to get the job done. Uh, there's two different styles of management, and I've done both. I came from a method where I told people what to do, I told people how to do it, and I told them when I wanted it done. But what I learned over the years was that really never made those people accountable, because when they failed at doing that, uh, they just said, "Oh, I didn't tell you that this is how I would do it. I didn't tell you I could do it in this period of time. You told me it's going to take me a week to do it, and I can't do it in a week. So I'm not responsible for then the fact that we weren't able to get it done in a week." And it took me years to really understand that, because I always felt in control, and I felt the more I could tell people what to do, the more effective I'd be. And you can be, and I have had success in doing it that way, but not with not the best results. By empowering people and getting people to tell you how long it's going to take them to do something, or how they would go about executing on what your objectives are, you now getting them more engaged. And by getting them more engaged, hopefully you're going to make them more accountable. And by making them more accountable, you're going to get some levels of productivity that I believe can be much, much more uh, creative and much more productive than in the environment where you didn't empower them to give you that input, and you just force the issue versus allowing them to come along.
Hmm. Do you have a favorite way of empowering your team members?
Yes, try to use questions. As a project manager, I like to think of myself as a leader or a coach.
Hmm.
Think of it as when you coach a football team, or any sport or team, where you really want to encourage people to work with each other and try allow the team to collaborate, because they're going to get much more dialogue with each other and get much more ideas on how to be more effective if you can get that communication going better. So yes, I would say one of the keys to empowering is have your team work with each other, talk with each other, let them use the word team, not try and separate themselves out as an individual or as a superstar. There is no superstar on the team. You're all equally accountable and responsible. And when you can get that message across, you can be very effective.
Thank you. That is a very good approach. Moving on from empowerment to communication. And I have intentionally chosen this picture here because I think this is probably what you think we shouldn't be doing. We shouldn't be using a megaphone and communicate in this way. Um, how does communication work in your approach?
Communications is really by making sure the message and the words you use can be have a meaning, and uh, people can comprehend and understand them, so there's no uh, misunderstanding of what the intention is. So clear communication, using your words carefully to define your responsibilities, to communicate what your levels of productivity are. I think we sometimes are too rushed. We don't think too much about sometimes what we're saying in the stage of digital communications, where everything is in an email or on a project plan. What that message portrays is very, very important. And I think we lose sight of that. We don't put enough detail or thought into making sure each sentence or each time I communicate, I've got an objective and an intent. It's a little bit like playing chess. Uh, once you've made the move, there's a consequence to every action, and you'll then see that consequence in the next several moves. Communication can have the same impact. If you communicate and say things incorrectly, people might get the wrong idea. Your scope might be now be perceived differently. There's so many ramifications from bad communication.
Uh, Communication is a two-way street. I mean, for us, reading your book and learning about proper communication, that's one thing. But how do I get my team and my team members to take it just as seriously and communicate back in the same, clear way?
It's hard. It's not easy to do. But if you can get the team to become more accountable to their actions and have the team members realize their success is going to be dependent on the other team members, you now can start finding some more camaraderie in the way in which their team works together.
Mhm.
Hopefully, that will lead to them communicating better, because they'll need to in order to talk with one voice. So it doesn't happen overnight. You can't go and tell a team start talking to each other, because they won't. You
That
need
would be
to
easy.
yeah, it definitely would be. You need to encourage it, but you need to show them the consequences of them not communicating. And when they fail, in the reflection, show them that by them not communicating with each other, they've caused the team to fail. And it wasn't one individual. One individual might have been the person not communicating, but all of you now are accountable. And by doing that, you'll have the team members help each other more. And that's really what you want to strive for, where the team is helping each other be successful.
Mhm. You used reflection, which was the second letter that we looked at. Do you bring your team in when you do the reflection, or is this more something that you do on your own?
This Agile says the team should do it without management's oversight. I've done both. I've included myself in because there is a reflection about how, as a project manager or a leader, how I'm performing. The team might want to communicate something to me.
Mhm.
The team should have some reflection without me as well. So I'm not that much of a stickler for the rules where Agile says, yeah, do these reflections without your stakeholders or out your teams. That's just one form of reflection. There's many forms that you should think through and work together with.
All right. Yeah. So we jump back to the second letter in the acronym there. Just a reminder, we had planning, reflection, organization, juggling, empowerment. We're right now going from communication here to teamwork. All right.
Well,
No project without a team. Kevin, walk us through this one, please.
very much as we discussed in the empowerment, who are you empowering? You're empowering your team. Uh, you can be so productive if you can get your team engaged and get your team to work together as one. I think that the key here about bringing your team together is making sure that they have one voice. I like to talk about Montessori's teaching in the schools. In how she brought different age groups together into one class. So Montessori brought 6, 7, and 8-year-olds together 3 years of different age groups, and then formed a classroom around that versus your typical form of education where you have one age group per class. And the reason Montessori did that was that the older kids would learn from the younger kids. They would actually learn by the questions the younger kids asked. The younger kids would learn from the older kids by example because they were watching the older kids in how they did stuff. And, the middle age group would learn from both. But you created this cross collaboration of different skill sets. And that's what happens on a team. When you form your team, it's very unlikely everybody's going to be at the same level, the same experience. Not everyone's subject matter experts. So you need to get the team to work together based on all these differences of how much experience they have and other aspects that are needed in order for them to come together. And that means you got to take things out of the team. You got to take the individual out of the team and not let them be focused on their own ego or their own accomplishments. And that is always by speaking with one voice. We a team. The team did this correct. The team was successful. The team made a mistake, or the team underestimated something, but it was a team effort. It was never an individual effort.
Mhm. This doesn't sound like an easy place to get to. This probably takes time. It probably, you have to go through the whole Tuckman ladder of team development. You have to have a team that's worked together for some time for this to actually be there and have one voice, right?
Oh, very much so. I think it's evident in watching sports. You all have your favorite teams. I'm guessing whether it's football, whether it's basketball, and hockey, and you will notice that when usually at the beginning of a season, a team is trying to find itself. The players are trying to find themselves, and through the years, those teams get better and better and better. And that's because they start relying on each other. They start understanding each other. They start understanding each individual's strengths and weaknesses. But the most important is they come together. And oh, very much so. It does take time. The quicker you can do it, the more effective you can be, the better the results you'll get. But either way, you got to learn how to work together in order for you to be effective together.
Mhm. Yeah, we have another comment here coming in from Yolanda who says, right, some people feel that they know it. Their minds aren't open to learning. And I can't quite see. Oh, shrugging. That's a shrugging emoji there at the end. Yeah. How do you feel about that?
No,
Kevin?
Lander is unfortunately correct. There's always an outlier. I think as a coach and as a leader, you really want to try get that person to conform. Now, I think if you go in it with the right intention and you allow the team to help you, so instead of you being the one as the leader being responsible for calling that person out, you're not going to be that effective, and that person's always going to be the know-it-all. But if you can get your team to challenge that person, now it's their peers are critiquing their performance. And you can do that again. I'm going to go back to that reflection, the R. You'll get much better results. Now, will you always get a result? No. Is there always going to sometimes be a team member that you cannot work with? Unfortunately, the answer is yes, they are the outliers, and sometimes they might need to be removed because they will cause the team not to be productive. They will
Mhm.
cause the team to not be as effective. Uh,
Yeah.
but the best result is to try get your team to correct the problem versus you as a manager, senior level executive forcing the issue.
And then let's just placed another comment here, and I think she opens up a Pandora's box with this one. How to build effective, strong working teams. All I can say is I have 474 episodes that we did here on the podcast, and I still don't know. Kevin, if you had to pick maybe one idea, one suggestion, how can we move towards building an effective, strong working team? What would you pick?
I would pick don't tell the team what to do, ask the team what to do. I call it the push pull approach. Don't push your thoughts and ideas on the team. Walk in their meeting, the very first meeting, the last meeting, walk in with asking your team what can they do and force the team to start communicating with each other. By asking that question, I mean, when I say force, you're not forcing them saying you will talk to each other. You by asking them the question, they'll be obligated to start talking to each other because they won't be able to answer you, and hopefully you can start letting the team evolve in that manner. That's the way I would approach it, and it works a lot of the time. It doesn't work all the time, but it's been the most effective for me.
Thank you for that. That was teamwork. Letter number 7 in the acronym, which means we have one more letter to go. The letter S is at the end, and S stands for standards. Uh, Walk us through this one. How do standards affect how we manage our projects?
We want to have a predictable level of understanding how people are going to work, how people are going to do things. If the environment's consistently changing, if the team's conduct is consistently changing, uh, you're going to consistently have to adjust, and that's going to cause you not to be that productive and effective. So by developing and establishing rules of conduct in how you're going to have your meetings, when are the meetings going to happen, what the level of cadence is, uh, and really just working through and being disciplined in setting out your order of efforts that you all need to work within, and the framework you need to work within will give you more tools to allow you to be successful, and it will also allow you to be more predictable in how you do things and understanding your capacity to do things. It will start bringing a lot more insight into how well you work together as a team.
I, in that case, I totally misunderstood the letter standards because I felt that when I read this first, the standards, we were talking about project management standards or standards that I have to follow, like how a project in my company has to be executed, or standards that are imposed by the government or some third party. So you're more focusing on your standards within the project itself then.
Within the project, and not to exclude what you've mentioned, there are standards that you need to work with inside if you are in an organization that's built rules, but it's really bringing it all together. There's the standards of the work product, There's the standards of how you work and collaborate as a team. There's standards relating to maybe a regulatory responsibility. So it is more than just the work product, but it shouldn't be just within the organization. It should include the work product as well.
All right. Thank you very much. We've gone through the acronym projects. Let me quickly recap here. So, 8 letters: P as in planning, R as in reflection, O as in organization, J as in my favorite, juggling, E as in empowerment, C as in communication, T as in teamwork, and S as in standards. Now, this comes from your book where you have these anecdotes and tips. Have you seen, Kevin, anybody following this approach, using your recommendations? What has improved for them? What has changed for them as they have used this framework that you've provided?
I have, and I've witnessed multiple benefits by watching different teams come together. Uh, some that come to mind when we've managed some very large projects in healthcare. Uh, you have two very uh, strong organization groups within the organization. Individual that would be responsible for the applications, and other individuals that would be responsible for the infrastructure. This is now in IT, and in order for those projects to be successful, these two large groups need to come together, and the application team needs to express to the infrastructure team what their requirements are and what their needs are to run an application. The infrastructure team needs to work and provide that to the application team. And many a times have I seen those groups blaming each other when things don't go well, or not really engaging in a collaborative manner, but thinking that the application team thinks the infrastructure team owes it to them to give them everything they need. The infrastructure team thinks that the application team needs to take what they have and do what they can with do the most with it that they can. And it's that lack of chemistry and that lack of unity that I've seen many projects fail. When practicing some of these tips that we just spoke of, and we can get everybody to feel more accountable, and everybody understanding that if one of us fail, we both fail. I think my experience has shown that that's changed the result and has brought about some very successful engagements and projects.
Thank you so much for this case study. Almost appreciate it very much. We have come to the end of the acronym, the end of those 8 letters. Let us go through the takeaways. Kevin, what would you say is the big, maybe the 1 or 2 things that you want our audience to take away from our conversation today?
I'd like them to find the items that relate to them and use the antidote as a way to remember. Sometimes we remember an event in history, or a famous person like Leonardo da Vinci. Most people know who he was. Most people know he started a lot of projects but didn't finish any of them himself. And to try see that as something they can learn from in how they're doing their work today. We can't all be Leonardo da Vinci's, and we're not going to all be famous by not getting stuff done. But use it as a way to remember, I need to get this to the finish line. I need to complete this. So, that's one antidote. Not communicating well. NASA, when they were doing the Mars lunar module, that blew up, unfortunately, because two teams didn't communicate well with each other, and there was a difference in the measurement of the sensors, and unfortunately, that led to a disaster. just not communicating. And hopefully by looking at those antidotes and looking at great events that people might think, oh yeah, I remember that, I know that one, oh yes, that's something I can relate to, they can then practice them in what they do today, and not just in project management. I think these are tools to practice how you live your life, how you conduct yourself. So that's what I want as a takeaway for people to try and bring together, which will allow them to remember some of these tips, and hopefully they can utilize them in a more effective manner.
Wonderful. Kevin, thank you so much for your time today. I and our audience appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your questions and putting this together. And thanks again for inviting me. And hopefully the audience has benefit from this.
Wonderful. And for those of you who are interested, don't forget, Getting the Job Done is a book written by Kevin Torf, practical advice and real world anecdotes to manage successful P.R.O.J.E.C.T.S projects. Available on Amazon and probably every fine bookstore that you may have. And that's it for today. I appreciate your time. Please do visit pm-podcast.com for show notes, transcripts, and PDU information. Our email address is info@pm-podcast.com. And finally, we have this, a meme with Yoda from Star Wars. The job done it is, he says. Thanks, everybody, and until next time.
Thank you.